Okay. Says that it's being recorded. I'm going to do a very quick overview of Frevo, really just 2 or 3 slides. I know that there are a few people on here who are not familiar with Frevo. This isn't going to take more than a couple of minutes, and then jump right into a demo where we'll have enough time to design a form, show you some of the main features in Frevo here, and then hopefully, we have some time for questions. Just some housekeeping here on the question front. On your control panel, when you join the webinar, you should see a panel here called questions. You may not see all of these choices in here, but there should be a questions panel. And if you have a question, please just type it in there. And my colleague Courtney is also on the phone here, and she will either try to answer it directly in the text itself or keep it for the end of the webinar when we hope to have some time to answer some questions. Okay, so I've got a lot of stuff to show you, so let's apologize if this webinar is kind of fast-paced. We will certainly be happy to give you a more detailed demo or examples or anything of that sort later on. Real quick overview of Frevo. What do we do? So we provide business process automation, form design, workflow software, and lots of customers are using our tools. They're very simple, very easy to use, 100% visual designers to form and workflow designers to design, create electronic forms and automate their everyday processes. Common examples are things like purchase orders and requisitions, sales order processing, new hire onboarding. They're doing all of this very, very quickly without the need to deploy scarce and expensive IT resources. I'm sure that none of you on the phone have an IT department that's sitting around twiddling their thumbs. These people are very busy, they're very hard to find, and they're very expensive. So anything that enables the rest of your organization to contribute towards this sort of digitization efforts is very valuable. And that's what we do. We have a number of customers, over 800, probably close to 900 customers now. And you can see that there are a number of names on here that I'm sure you recognize. We have a lot of universities using Frevo, as well as K-12 schools. Boston Public Schools is on there. A number of other large organizations as well, all over the United States and definitely all over the world as well. The Australian government and the New Zealand governments, for example, use Frevo in certain agencies. What are the kinds of things that they're doing with it? I've already mentioned some of these things. Really, it's essentially taking their everyday operational processes, the core operations, things that really run their day-to-day business, purchase orders, expense reports, travel authorizations, new hire onboarding, vacation requests or absence records. For schools, I mentioned schools, permission forms, field trip permission, media permission, et cetera, very common. I'm sure many of you get these paper forms that come home, digitizing them. Sales orders, transportation, another important form in the K-12 school arena in particular. And then another important thing is database SQL integration. Now, Frevo offers integration with a variety of systems, but we offer a particularly powerful and capable database connector. And we have a lot of customers that really rely on this every day. There's got to be a couple of hundred people that have Frevo forms and workflows connected to their SQL databases, doing really amazing things. And I'll try and I will be showing you a quick example of a SQL integrated form, and of course, point you to the appropriate resources. So now, given that this is about forms, let's get a quick look at what business forms and why Frevo, why our solution is applicable to business forms. So business forms tend to be very long. It's different from a contact form. I mean, of course, you have simpler ones as well, but a loan application or even a new hire onboarding process can have a number of lengthy forms. There's a lot of data that might need to be entered. Validation can be complicated, and it is absolutely essential to avoid errors and omissions, particularly since the forms are lengthy. They're filled with business logic. You want to show this section or fill in this section only if the answer to this question is yes. If no, you can skip it. That kind of stuff is very common. Obviously, there's a lot of calculation. Might also be different parts of the form need to be filled in depending on location, title, etc., etc. Mobility is really important nowadays. If you ask I'm sure if I asked any of you, if your people use mobile devices, the answer is obviously yes. And you want your internal digital forms and processes to work on these mobile devices so that people can use them from whatever device they want, and they can use them anytime and anywhere. And also, of course, nowadays, as more and more millennials enter the workforce, more and more millennials are your customers. This generation has grown up on their phones, and you need to be able to support that. Electronic signature is another important aspect of business forms. Many of these forms need to be signed. That's just a fact of life. And if you need to print the form, sign it, and then scan it back and email it forward, it sort of defeats the purpose of digitization in the first place. I already mentioned database and other business system integration. Certainly, there are many other capabilities and requirements for business forms. An example there is attachments. You might have a capital expenditure authorization form that might have a large number of attachments as why are we building this new building and what are the design documents for it and so on and so forth. So business forms essentially are complicated. They tend to have a number of important features. And the reason our customers use Frevo is because you can create real business forms without the need to write any code. So you can drag and drop to create these forms. You have a number of wizards for business logic, integration, as well as for process automation. So that's my little spiel, and let's just jump right into a demo here. So the first thing in a demo is just drag and drop form design. So it's very easy with Frevo to design any form using a very simple and easy to use visual form designer without any coding. So let's take a look at it. So I've got a few forms here that I've created, and this one is a blank form. So here's just a completely blank form on the screen. And what I'm going to do is drag and drop controls from this palette on the right-hand side into this on the left-hand side into this canvas on the right-hand side. And you'll see how easy it is to design a form. So let's start with a date. I'm going to take this date and stick it on here. Just drag and drop. I mean, hopefully this drag and drop is rendering smoothly across the webinar. If not, I assure you that it really is very, very smooth. Changing the label, it's a matter of simply typing. Here's today's date. This is kind of wide for a date. So let's take a look at some of the properties in here. So the designer has a palette on the left-hand side, which has a number of controls. And then it also below that has a properties panel. The properties panel changes to display the properties of whatever you happen to be working on at this particular instant in time. So for example, if you click on the toolbar at the top, this properties panel will display the properties of the form as a whole. If you click on this control, it'll show you that particular control. So we want to make that a little bit smaller. So we'll click on the Style tab here, and you'll see this little width bar. In Frevo, controls can be 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 12 columns wide. So you'll choose a width for the control and simply click on it, and this thing will, oops. Okay, sorry, it just took a little while. I click on it, this is 3 columns, now it's 4 columns, and so on and so forth. Essentially, 12 columns fit across the screen on a single line. And if you add controls that add up to more than 12 columns, Frevo will automatically flow them onto the next line. Let's take a look at some of these other properties in here also. If I want to make this a required control, again, a very common thing in business forms, the date must be filled in. I can just check required, and you can see that the background of the control turned yellow. And of course, if you don't like yellow background, you can change the look and feel of what it means to be required in a variety of ways in here. Controls can be made invisible. They can be enabled or disabled. Printable, if unchecked, will, in the print view of this form, will not print this control. And then there are a few other controls in here as well. There are, let me drag a few other controls in here first. So now I'm going to drag in a section. A section is a repeating control. Now, as you drag and drop, you can see that there's an arrow that's pointing where this control will drop. So when I hover over today's date, when I'm pointing it down, if I'm somewhere off in off to the right, it'll say, oh, you can't drop it here. Now this is saying that the control will drop right below, and when I drop it, the section drops right below. If I drop something below a different control, it'll take up the entire 12 column width. So let's change this label. Here's another way to change the label. I can go to the properties panel here and go into the label, and I can change this to personal information. So now you see that I've created a collapsible section called personal information. Let's drag some controls into it. Let's drag in a text control. We'll call this first name, and let's make it 4 columns wide. This is taking so long, but okay. I'm going to drag in a control here. Now this one I'm going to drop off to the side of first name, and Frevo is saying, well, you dropped it to the side of a control here. We're going to guess that you want it to be the same width as this control, meaning you're trying to create a side-by-side layout. And of course, if that's not what you intended, you can always go in here and change its width. So let's drop in an email address. And now I'm going to drop in another text control here, which is manager ID. You'll see here now, because 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12, when I dropped in another control, it automatically went off to the next line. You can always force a control to the next line. You can go here, go back to style, and check this new line. You'll see how it goes off onto a new line. This ensures that that control will always be displayed on a new line, independent of how many columns are available on the screen. I'm going to drop in another control here called US zip code. And I wanted to do that just to give you a look at some of these rules in here. So some of the properties in here, excuse me. So one of the things you can do in Frevo also is create validation, custom validation for any control in here. And there are many ways to do this. And one of the powerful ways to do this is to use a pattern. Now, a pattern is just a regular expression, and this may appear a little bit technical, but it's actually really easy. You can pretty much find patterns online for practically anything that you're trying to validate. What this pattern means is 5 digits or 5 digits followed by a dash followed by 4 digits, which, as many of you will be familiar with, is the US zip code. Frevo will automatically ensure, and we'll see when we try to fill this out, that that pattern is respected. I can also put in a custom error message in here. So I can say, I don't know, zip code does not conform, whatever. I can type in anything I want in here. It can be, it can contain links. It can contain, whatever you want in any of these things. A hint is just a tooltip. When I enter there, when I hover over the control, you'll see it appears as a tooltip. Help just places a help icon. And again, you can type in anything you want in here. You'll see a little help icon appeared here. I click it, it displays the value. And again, you can type in HTML, hyperlinks to help information, whatever you want in there. And a placeholder is just some text that appears before I start typing. Once I start typing, it'll disappear. Okay, so those are some of the properties that we have in there for a variety of controls. Most controls have all of these properties. We already went through the style tab in here, but a real quick look, you can change the color of a label very easily. Just make it red. I don't know. I'm going to make it bold, actually. You can make it bold. You can italicize it. You can do all of these things very easily in Frevo. And of course, if you want, you can go well beyond that and do a lot of custom styling for your fonts as well. Now, real quick, let me drag and drop a few. Let me just go through these controls and drag and drop a few more. You see that you have text area, drop down, radio, checkbox, the standard HTML controls, date, email, money, phone, quantity, number. These are essentially pre-formatted text controls. So this is an email control. You'll see that when we try to fill it out, it will enforce an email address, that you have to enter something there that looks like an email address. Sections, repeats, tabs, panels, and tables. These are grouping controls. You already saw a section. Let's drag in a tab control here. You'll see that it's just a tab view, something you're pretty familiar with. I'm going to call the first tab personal, and then drop this thing in there. Let's create a second tab called incidents, and we're not going to need a third tab, so we'll delete it. An incident is itself as a section. It has a date, so let's call it date of incident. And we'll make this a little bit smaller as well. And then incident perhaps has a description. So we'll say that's what an incident is, a description and the date are both required. And then we're going to say, well, we can have multiple incidents. So how do you create something repeating? Again, a really common requirement in business forms. People have multiple homes, multiple offices, multiple phone numbers, multiple whatever. It's easy in Frevo. Simply drag in a repeat, drag the incident into the repeat. And when you look at its properties now, you'll see that a min and a max has appeared in there. Let's put in a max of 3 and a min of 1, and you'll see a little plus icon has appeared there. And when we try to fill out this form, you'll see that that we can create up to 3 incidents in there. Okay, so that's a quick look at some of the controls in here. I'm not going to go through every single control in there. Perhaps a message is a good one to take a look at. Let's drop a message control at the top here. Say this is just a standard HTML message on the screen. You have a number of types of messages. You can have a info message, you can have a success message, a warning message, etc. And then there's also a rich text editor available with this, so you can format your message however you want. You know, whatever, etc. Okay, so it's pretty easy to create these kinds of messages. Also, these messages can be dynamic in Frevo as well. And then a real quick thing I did want to also do is, let me drag in a signature in here. I'll drop it right above the submit panel, submit control here. And a signature control, just drag and drop it in here. And you'll see when we try to use this form, the signature, when clicked on, will allow you to sign that form. There's also a different kind of signature available. If we, let's click on this personal information section here, and you'll see that sections have a security tab in here in addition to the settings and the style. So let's take a look at the security tab. First off, you can assign a role to a section, so that section will only be visible if the person filling out the form happens to have that role. But then down below here, there's also a signature. So you can select a text/signature image or a wet signature. We'll leave it as text signature. The wet signature and the text signature are different in the sense that the text signature will just put in your name in a certain font, and the wet signature will pop up a box that allows you to sign using your mouse or touchscreen. You'll see that a sign this section button has automatically appeared. Let's make it must sign. You'll see that that button has now turned red, indicating that this section must be signed in order to proceed, in order for that form to be submitted. Okay, so there's a lot more to form design. There are huge, very large and complex forms that have been designed in Frevo. I'll give you a quick pointer to, if you go to our website at www.frevo.com and click on videos, you'll see down here there's a detailed form design tutorial. And you can click on this video and you go through a really detailed tutorial on how to design forms in Frevo. And finally, and if you go to our documentation webs online and you click on resources and tutorials, you'll see again that there's a forms tutorial. So this is the essentially documentation version of the same thing that is being explained in this video. So you can go through these and learn how to create drag and drop to design these kinds of forms. Let's give this form a quick try. I'm going to click on this icon over here, and you'll see that the form pops up now in a new window saying give it a try. You'll see that here's the date control. Date controls come with a picker, and you can just click on it to select. The format of the date is automatically configured. We set it to automatic. We recommend you leave it at automatic. It'll automatically change depending on where the form is being filled in. So as you know, dates are different in the US, MMDDYY, versus Europe, where they might be DDMMYY. So you can take care of those things. The system takes care of those things automatically. And also, you can also just type in dates, and it's smart enough to figure out what the heck you meant. It'll parse it and it'll put it in as in the format that's desired by the system in here. I can start typing in here Here's my first name and last name. Now, if I just type in this as an email address, you'll see that the error message says this is the default error message. Of course, as you saw, we can configure it. So I can type in something that looks more like an email address, and you'll see that it's happy. It says, okay, I guess this is a valid email address. For the zip code, if you remember, we said that it's got to have 5 digits or 5 digits followed by 4 digits, and you'll see how Frevo automatically enforces that. You also notice that the error message that's displayed is the message that we had set up in the form in there. There's my help text as well. Now, when I click this sign this section button here, you'll see that it's automatically going to put my first name and last name, which for whatever reason happens to be James Kirk in this particular setting. I must have been testing something. But this is what my first name and last name is configured as. It's put my name as well as today's date automatically. This signature is a little bit different in the sense that when I click on it over here, it pops up a box here and I can sign using my mouse. I'm not very good at doing it with my mouse. It's a lot easier on a mobile touchscreen. If you go to this incidents tab here, you'll see that we have an incident that we must fill in because we said that the minimum number of incidents is 1. So I'm going to click on this and I say, okay, on the 30th of October, I got a parking ticket in New Haven, which is very common. And now we're happy and the form can be submitted. All required controls have already been filled in. You saw that the plus sign is there indicating that you can have multiple incidents. You'll see that I can add up to 3. If you remember, we set the maximum number as 3. As soon as I have a third incident, Frevo will automatically remove the plus sign. Now, we also, if you remember, we also had a date and description as required. So Frevo is smart enough to know that. If I enter a date, I have to have a description. So it'll automatically turn the description field yellow and you won't be able to submit the form unless you fill something in there. Okay, so that's a quick look at a simple form that we created in design. I'm going to simply submit it, and this is just by default. It says, thank you, we've received your submission. What can you do when the form is submitted? A variety of things. They have there are 2 sets of wizards here. This one is what happens to your data. So when the form is submitted, there are a number of things you can do. You can email the data, you can send it to a custom web application, web service. You can save it to some document management systems, Google Drive, file system, SharePoint. You can also send a second email. Another common requirement, for example, I've got a sales order that's signed by an external client. Let's say when the form is submitted, I want to send an email internally first saying, hey, your sales order was completed. Here's the information. Here's the document. I might also want to send an acknowledgement to the client. We've received your order and we'll be processing it. Docurize are an advanced topic related to integration with databases and other third-party systems, Google Sheets, etc. So we'll ignore those for now. You can use those as well for essentially taking a specific set of actions for when the form is actually submitted. And then the second set of wizards here kind of addresses what happens in terms of what the user sees. So I can send the information by email, I can put it into a database and stick it in SharePoint. And then once all that is done, I want to be able to display a custom message. I want to forward users to a web page and a variety of other actions as well. And then there are similar error actions here, and that's simply really the same thing, but a different. You may want to display a different message or forward users to a different page if the actions, if there are errors when the form has been submitted. So you might want to tell the user, you know, an error occurred. Please call 800 blah 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 if you want to go forward. Okay, so that's a quick look at dragging and dropping to design a form. Now let's jump into some business logic. So one of the most common pieces of business logic that our customers use is pre-filling fields. So why make a user fill in something like today's date? You know, it makes no sense. Today's date is something that's known to the system, so we might as well fill it in ourselves. So let's create a quick business rule here. I'm going to click on this rules tab here, click plus to create a new rule, expand it and say set today's date, let's say. And then I'm going to click on this run builder tab, and that's going to pop up what we call the visual rule builder. Now this visual rule builder is a super powerful feature in Frevo. Setting today's date is one of the easiest things you can do with it, but it's really capable of doing of programming essentially, or generating, I should say. You're not really programming a wide variety of business logic, and we'll take a look at some of that as we go along. So in this case, there are no conditions. We always want to set today's date. We don't want to set today's date when something is true or false. So we're going to check this box saying this is an initialization rule. So the no matter what, the today's date will be set up. When we click next here, we're going to say, okay, what do you want to do? So we're going to select a field, then you can start typing. You'll see it's called today's date. What are we going to do? We're going to set today's date to, and then you can enter an expression. So there's you can start typing in here, and you'll see that autocomplete will complete the set of expressions. It's a comprehensive set of functions and expressions that's available here to you, kind of like an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheet. If you're familiar with creating with using expressions and functions in Excel, this should be a piece of cake. You can do concatenation, addition, subtraction, the standard set of operations that you might normally think about doing in an Excel spreadsheet. Click next over here. Obviously, there's nothing to do here because since there's no condition, there can't be it's always true. There's no false involved in here. And click finish, and that's it. We've created a rule. If you're curious, behind the scenes, there's some code that's being generated. In this case, it's really simple, and you can always take a look at this code. And then in certain situations, either the business logic that's being performed is so complicated, or the person who's building this form is an expert in JavaScript or just wants to customize it. You can always click edit code in here and customize this the code that's generated as desired. Not necessary in many cases in here. Let's take a quick look at this and give it a shot. When I try to run this form here, hopefully I didn't mess that up, and you'll see that today's date is automatically populated to the 15th of November, which in fact is today's date. Okay, so that's a great a quick look at a simple business rule in a form. Let's take a quick look at this form. This is just it's a very similar form. But it has a business rule pre-created. Fill in some of this personal information. Once again, I know who's logged in. Might as well fill in that first name, last name, email address, and manager information programmatically. Why make the user type that in? Let's take a peek at that rule here. It's called set user details, and it's really pretty similar to the previous rule. There's no condition, initialization rule. And then I'm going to set first name, last name, email, and manager to these values using these functions: user first name, user last name, user email, user manager ID. So just like today, there are a bunch of functions available to set the user's information as well. Okay, let's give this a quick look here, and you'll see that in this case now, not only is the date filled in, but also the first name, last name, email address, and manager ID are also automatically filled in. This manager ID is pretty important. It's often used to route. So the manager information is available in Frevo, or if Frevo is set up so that it integrates with your Active Directory, for example, it can pull that information from Active Directory. So Frevo, the form essentially can know who my manager is. So why is that relevant? Well, if I've got a purchase order or a vacation request or travel authorization, most of the time you don't want that form to be routed to any manager, but you need it to be routed to my specific manager. And rather than have the user fill that out, or the user email it to the appropriate manager, or type it in here and make mistakes, why not let the system deal with it, since the information already resides in the system. So a small little thing that can make a big difference in making processes and approvals far, far more efficient. So that was a quick look at what we did is we designed a form by dragging and dropping. We showed you repeat signatures, some dynamic behavior to really initialize some fields as well. Just want to go through a couple more examples of dynamic behavior here. Another very common business requirement in almost every business form, from expense report, travel authorization, timesheet, purchase order, all of those have calculations. So if I look at a purchase order, so here's an example of a form where I'm going to buy a few things on behalf of the company, of my company. we've dragged in a table control in here. It's very easy to use a table control. Let's just drag one in for the heck of it right now. Here's a table. I can just click on this thing and rename it to description if I want, whatever. I can type whatever I want in here, and I can also drag in additional fields in here. Let's say I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to call this a subtotal in here. And then I can also click on the table in here and set its style. So let's say I want its width to be 50%, 25%, 25%. You'll see how the table automatically resizes. Tables are like repeats in the sense you can have a minimum and maximum as well. So I can specify how many rows, maximum number of rows can be available in a table. So let's get rid of that table. I already happen to have one created here. This one's got a description, a quantity, a unit price, and a subtotal. So I'm going to, it's obvious what's going on in here. I'm going to type line items for every thing that I'm going to buy and a quantity and unit price, and the system will calculate the subtotal. Now, this is a great example of where many customers also use integration with their backend systems. So when I type in a description, I might not even type it in. I might actually be able to select the description of what I'm ordering from a pick list. When a quantity, when I pick a particular item, the unit price can be pulled from a backend database as well, saying, well, I know what the price of this thing is, and I type in a quantity and the subtotal will be computed. And the grand total is simply the sum of all the subtotals, obviously. So let's take a quick peek at this, at the rule for doing that. It's very simple. Calculate subtotal. Here's the rule. What are the conditions? Well, you can only calculate a subtotal if you have a quantity or a unit price. So you'll see in the when block here, put in when the quantity is filled or the unit price is filled, and the unit price is filled, I'm sorry. So the logic expression below is 1 and 2. This is automatically computed for you, but you can edit it if you have complex logic here. So in this case, when the quantity and unit price are filled, what I want to do is I want to set the subtotal to the product of the quantity and the unit price. And otherwise, I want to simply leave the subtotal as empty. That's all there is to it. You don't need to worry about the fact that there are multiple repeating rows in the table. There are several subtotals. You'll see that the rule code that's generated behind the scenes takes care of all that junk for you. So there's a for loop in there, and it's doing the right thing automatically. So it's automatically going to compute the subtotal for you in each row, and you don't really have to worry about it. The calculating grand total is even easier. There's no condition. All I'm going to do is set the grand total to the sum of the subtotals. So this is an example of a function that takes a parameter. So a sum has to sum something else. And so I can type subtotal in here, and that's all there is to it. And once again, behind the scenes, if you look at the rule code in here, you'll see that it's doing the proper set of things. It's looping through all the available subtotals and putting the, adding it all up and setting the value of the grand total to that result. So again, doing these kinds of normal things that you do in your business forms is so easy and trivial with Frevo that really anyone can do it. You don't need to be a programmer to be able to create this kind of form here. You see that the date, the first name, last name, email are initialized. So here's there's a field in this form called full name, which concatenates the first name and the last name, again, using a business rule. If I start typing in here, I've got a red widgets. I've got 13 of them, and they cost $15.18. You'll see the subtotal is computed. I got some blue widgets, and I want a lot more of those, and they're more expensive. Well, oops, I'm going to type something like this in here. You'll see that the subtotal is computed for each line item, and the grand total is automatically computed for you, and you really don't have to do anything. It's very simple, very easy to do. This particular form also has an upload, what we call an upload control, that allows you to attach supporting documents. Simply going to click on add file here, click browse, and you'll see it can browse through and upload whatever documents you need in here. And the signature control we already looked at. Okay, so that's a quick look at calculating a grand total. And a final bit of how do you do some business logic here is showing and hiding controls, another super common requirement. So I've just expanded that form in here to include a payment method, check or credit card, and then some sections or information that's only applicable depending on what you've chosen over here. The business rule again is really, really easy. Um, and you'll see what it looks like. The condition when the payment method is check, I want the check message to be visible, and you can see all of these little things can be done. I want the credit card section to be hidden, and I want those fields in there to become optional. And really, otherwise, I want the reverse to be true. I want to set these all up to be required. And you'll see that the system automatically takes care of these kinds of things. So this just makes the form a lot easier to fill out. I select check, it's only going to show me this information. I select credit card, all right, well, then I'm going to show you these sections over here. Why show these sections? And have instructions to the user, only fill this out if you're going to be using a credit card, etc., etc. So this kind of dynamic behavior, just to quickly recap here, pre-filling fields, doing calculations, dynamic forms which show hide logic, and a whole host of additional dynamic behavior is very easy to do in Frevo. It's completely visual. There's no coding required. Very easy. Anyone really can create these kinds of rules. Okay. All right. Now we've gone through the dynamic forms. I have a few other examples here to show you. I'm not going to. We don't have enough time to show you building any of these things, but you might have SQL databases in your organization. Almost every company has databases. And your business forms and processes are simply, they're just going to be more useful if they can integrate with these databases. So here are a couple of examples. This one is dynamic sales orders from a database. So this is connected live to a database. You'll see the list of customers here. This list of customers, it wasn't obvious when I popped up the form, but this list of customers was populated by going to the database. If I select a customer in here, the list of orders dynamically populates and changes to reflect the orders for that particular customer. I select a different customer, the list of orders changes. I select an order in here, and you see that the line items below automatically populate with information from the SQL database. And the whole form is extremely dynamic. You don't need to reload or do anything of that sort. It just instantaneously updates with line items for that particular order. The cool thing about this is there's no coding at all required. You didn't need to write a single line of code to enable this kind of behavior in here. Now the database connector is also really powerful in the sense, okay, I've got this list of line items here. Let's say I make some changes here. If I click plus and I were to add a line item here, and I click minus and I delete this, and I change some value in here, whatever the price has changed, blah, blah, blah. And then when you click submit, the database connector automatically does the right thing. It will remove the row for the line item that was removed. It will add a new row for anything new that was added, and it will update any line item in there that was changed. So it's very smart in that regard. It can basically do the right thing, create a new row, remove a row, or update a row automatically depending on what you did in the form in there. It can also run stored procedures. It has security built in to make sure that no one can access your queries without authorization, and also protects against things like SQL injection and all of that stuff without you really having to worry about it at all. Here's another quick example of a database connector form. This is a super common form, a master detail form. It's connecting to the same database, again, that same list of customers. As soon as I select a customer in here, come on, you'll see that the details for that customer automatically populate. Select a different customer, and it automatically populates. Okay. So, real quick, SQL database integration is very easy. It's just built into Frevo, and no coding required to do that as well. There's a lot of information online, again, under these in our documentation under resources. If you click on tutorials, you'll see that there's a detailed database connector tutorial available in here.
Ashish?
Yep.
There's a question on the database business rules. Are the rules exposed in the browser's source code? Do you know?
No. Business rules are never visible to the browser. To the person filling in the form in the browser has no access to the rules. The only situation in which you can see the rules is in this debug mode. I mean, if you are if you're literally testing the form as the designer, then you have a debug console here, which is going to show you what rules are running. But that's really only for debugging, to make sure that the, testing, make sure that the rule is running. When the form is actually deployed and is used by the end user, you have no access to those rules at all. I mean, that would be a significant security issue, absolutely. So that's a good question. Okay, is that it, Courtney?
Yeah, for now. Yep.
All right. Google Apps integration is also built into Frevo. There's quite a lot of integration, but this is I'll quickly point to this one because a lot of customers do use this, especially in the education industry, colleges and K-12 schools. Google Apps is a very common thing in there. It's very easy to integrate Frevo with Google Apps. So let's take a look at one example here. This is a dynamic absence record workflow. So you'll see over here, this is I think it's coming from this Google Sheet. So you see there's something called school site, and there are a number of sites in here, the principal, the validator, and the approver names. You'll see that the school site in here is currently unpopulated, but when I click this Get from Google button, it's now gone off to this Google spreadsheet, and you'll see that the same set of sites are visible in here that are in this Google Sheet. So you can do lookups from this Google Sheet. It's also gone and looked it up and filled in the I haven't selected one. So let me select one in here. And you'll see now when I select one, it again goes to that Google Sheet and says, okay, who's the principal, who's the validator, and who's the approver for that particular school site. So you can do all kinds of lookups from Google Sheets. We have customers using this kind of integration to look up vacation days, for example, that are maintained in a Google Sheet. There's a whole host of things you can do in here. You can also submit forms that write to a Google Sheet very easily in Frevo. You can also have forms that, here's an example. This is a general permission form. Again, a real common form in schools. So I've got a general permission form, media, directory release, etc. I'm going to simply click a signature, whatever, something in here. And then let's type in a name here, forms webinar, we'll call it. And when I click submit in here, it's going in and uploading a set of documents into this Google Drive folder, which I happen to have open here. And I hope there's something called Forms Webinar in there. Here's the folder called Forms Webinar. And you'll see that the PDF of that form that I just submitted is in there. And it also happens to have generated a couple of PDFs with the data from that form. One is in English and another one is automatically generated in Spanish as well. So you can create forms that use Google Drive as a document repository if you want. And then finally, here's another real quick example of an interesting way a customer of ours uses Google Drive. Yeah.
Ashish, just when you're done describing the Google, can you explain the support for Microsoft Office 365? I think the SharePoint connector may be
Sure.
coming into play there.
Yeah, no problem. So this is an example of a customer is using Google Maps, the Google Maps API, to automatically calculate mileage between various locations. I've just used cities in here, but in their case, they have specific addresses for their various locations as well. The Office 365 integration, there are a few ways you can integrate with Office 365. Another quick thing, by the way, before I move on from that, Google Apps also support single sign-on, so you can sign into Frevo using your Google account. So you don't need to create a new account or a password. Just sign into Google and use your Google credentials to sign into Frevo. That's a good segue into Office 365. You can do exactly the same thing with Office 365 as well. So you can use SAML or Active Directory. That's not quite Office 365, but your Active Directory or your Azure Active Directory. All of those configurations are available for you to enable authentication and single sign-on into Frevo using your Microsoft standard Microsoft login. So if in your organization you're using Windows Logon, you can deploy Frevo so that it automatically logs you into Frevo as well. With regard to, in addition to that, the most important integration we have in there, is with SharePoint. So you have essentially have the ability to create forms and workflows that save their data into, oops, I guess I don't have a good example here. There's a video in here, so you can go to our under Frevo platform SharePoint workflow, click on watch video, and you can watch the video. What you can do is create forms and workflows that, when submitted, will update right to a SharePoint list or write to a SharePoint library. So you can save your data and your documents into SharePoint Online as well. At this point, Frevo does not integrate with Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. It doesn't have integration with Excel like it does with Google Sheets. Okay. Real quick, we're kind of going a little bit over here, but I just wanted to give you a quick look. Here's another very important thing that customers do is generate a PDF. Let's just give some date in here. So this is for example, for a W-4. So here's, I've just, luckily all of this stuff is pre-filled in here. I'm going to click continue here. Here I'm choosing some allowances, whatever. And a signature in here. And when I click continue over here, you see that I will have a chance to look at my W-4. So this is a federal W-4. I guess it's an old one from 2012, but you'll see how all the fields have been populated, including the signature. So Frevo also has the capability to create electronic forms and workflows that will generate PDFs. We also support arbitrary languages worldwide, English. So here's an example of an emergency contact form that's in Chinese. You can create the same form in a zillion languages. Once again, I'm simply going to sign here. And you can see that even though the form is being filled out in Chinese, because I happen to understand Chinese, when it is submitted, the system can generate a PDF in English. So for example, if your internal office staff prefer to look at the emergency information in English, the same form is generated in English for you. So you can deploy forms that people can fill in however they want, on whatever device they want, on any in any language, and yet generate what you need for your own office. The same thing about mobility, it's just built in. Let me take one quick, I don't know if this is working. Come on. Okay, so you can see here I'm on my iPhone, and on our website over here, let's take a quick look at one of those same forms that we've already used, this dynamic customer information. I click on it here. You've seen this form already on the desktop browser. You'll see first off how the customer details has automatically changed to conform to the smaller screen of the mobile device. Where these fields were side by side in the desktop, they're automatically one below the other. But the same functionality is available. I select a customer in here, and this thing goes off to the database. It's doing the exact same thing. It's going and integrating with the database and pulling out the information from the database and automatically updating. Select a different customer there, and you'll see that it should update from the database again. So all of this stuff just works, and it works automatically. You don't need to write a single line of code or make any changes. And of course, like with everything in Frevo, if you want to, you can customize the look and feel. You can customize a lot of things in Frevo as well. And then the last thing in here, and this webinar isn't about workflow, but that's a huge part of what Frevo also provides. In the real world, business forms are routed. They never live in isolation. They're not an island, and forms must be sent to a manager, to roles, conditionally, anonymously. People need to be notified. You may need to reject it. Reminders and escalations may need to be provided. You might need to save and load back complicated long forms that people can't complete in one shot. All of that stuff is just built into Frevo. So that's a quick, not that quick, but an overview. Frevo really does have a vast number of features. You can create amazingly complicated forms that meet real business requirements without writing any code, and anyone in your organization can do it. I already pointed you to a few resources in here, but real quick, if you go to our website at frevo.com under Get Help, there's a videos section that contains a number of the most commonly watched videos, examples, These are templates that you can try out, from workflows to Google Apps to database to PDF generation and calculations. All of that good stuff is in there. And then we also have under our customers page, you can check out a number of case studies from happy customers. And then we also have a lot of information under our solutions pages, human resources, accounting and finance for colleges and K-12, and then specific use cases in there as well. So thank you very much. Apologize that we went 8 minutes over. Courtney, we have a few minutes. Are there any questions I can answer?
Yes, actually there are. Let me just kind of go through the list here. So somebody was asking about the workflows, which I think you just kind of pointed to, some of the tutorials and the
Right.
documentation on the workflow. Would you just show everybody where they can sign up for the next mini training on the workflows?
Yes.
Because I think that would be very helpful for folks. And we hold the mini trainings every month. So we do provide training on those, as well as some great examples of how the workflows work
Sure.
in there. Okay.
So a couple of quick things here. One is on our website here under platform. There's something called process automation. You can go here and look at read about it. And there's a pretty good video in here. This is a 6-minute video that gives you an introduction, shows you all the steps very quickly in how to automate a purchase order. Process templates, you can look at some of those templates. What Courtney was talking about here under Get Help, there's also help and training. And in there's this thing called group training in here, which you can click on, and you'll see that you can sign up for those mini trainings that she was talking about. When's the next Flow Designer one? It's on December 11th at 11 a.m. All of the mini trainings are at 11 a.m. And then, of course, if you have any questions, specific questions about your workflow or anything of that sort, just contact us. That's easy enough. You can click contact. There's a Bravo form, obviously, for contacting us, or you can certainly send us an email as well.
Somebody wanted to know if all of the views are compliant with web content accessibility guidelines. So I think that might tie into the ADA, possibly.
Web content, yeah, WCAG. Yes, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I should have actually talked about that. Yes, indeed, the Fravo forms are all accessible, and I think if I remember right. I think if I remember right, you just click on the form over here and just check this accessible, and that's it. As soon as you check accessible, you'll see a few things have changed. The stars have appeared in here, but the system is completely ADA and WCAG 2.0 actually, I think, compliant. So short answer is yes.
Okay, great. Let's see, and I think we talked about the SharePoint connector, which was another question there. And then I think that's probably a good idea. Let's see. You mentioned using SQL Server tables. What about views and stored procedures? So those are all supported, through integration with the database connector. But it sounds like people are really interested in the capabilities with that database connector.
Sure. Yeah. So the database connector is very powerful, and it's a very popular, I should say. You can absolutely use things like stored procedures. There is this DB connector tutorial. Definitely recommend this is the place to start. Actually, you can get a link to this from our website under platform. You go to database forms here, and there's gotta be I gotta believe there's some link to the tutorial. There isn't. That's weird. We probably should update this page with a link to the tutorial. But there is a detailed tutorial. It's under resources, tutorials, database connector tutorials. So this is the best place to start. It really goes through. Well, it takes about 2 hours to do if you, assuming you know your database and SQL. That's really the only thing you need to know to use the DB connector. You need to know SQL or stored procedure. You need to be able to work with your database. On the form side, the data management side, all of that stuff is done automatically with Fable. And of course, we're here to help you. As Courtney, do we do a database mini training as well? I think we do, don't we, periodically?
We will do the database training kind of on demand if we have a group of folks. But more often, what we'll do is if you are integrating with the database or using our database connector, we provide the training on how to install and set it up on a one-to-one basis. So that training is really
Right.
specific to your environment more often.
Right.
Um,
That makes sense.
so
So contact us if there is the tutorial, but we are more than happy to help. Just contact us if we can assist you with the database, answer any questions, do a demo, any of those things about the database connector. As Courtney said, the fact of the matter is database integration is often very specific. Some people have SQL Server, someone has Oracle, someone has Progress, someone has whatever, different databases with different kind of security, and so on and so forth. So it's not hard to do. There is a small learning curve, maybe an hour or two, couple of hours, and you should be in great shape creating really interesting forms with the database.
I think that's it. I think
Alrighty.
we've covered pretty much everything.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much again, everybody, for attending. I really do appreciate it. Sorry that we went over a little bit again. A recording of this webinar will be available in a couple of days max, and we will send you information on that. Thanks again. Bye bye.